sunshine. We'll understand it all by and by. When death has come and taken our loved ones, it leaves our home so lonely and drear. Then do we wonder why others prosper, living so wicked year after year. Farther along we'll know all about it. Farther along we'll understand why. Cheer up, my brother, live in the sunshine. We'll understand it all by and by. When we see Jesus coming in glory, when he comes from his home in the sky, then we shall meet him in that bright mansion. We'll understand it all by and by. Farther along we'll know all about it. Farther along we'll understand why. Cheer up, my brother, live in the sunshine. We'll understand it all by and by. Tempted and tried, we're oft made to wonder why it should be thus all the day long, while there are others living about us, never molested, going the wrong. Farther along we'll know all about it. Farther along we'll understand why. Cheer up, my brother, live in the sunshine. We'll understand it all by and by. When death has come and taken our loved ones, it leaves our home so lonely and drear. Then do we wonder why others prosper, living so wicked year after year. Farther along we'll know all about it. Farther along we'll understand why. Cheer up, my brother.
All right, come on in. Exodus chapter 20. Pick up with the sixth commandment. We've talked about these, working our way through these 10 commandments, taking my time a little bit. And we left off with honor your father and mother, and now we have these series of commands that are dealing with one another. The horizontal relationship that we have with each other. And they're the foundation of all life and relationships. And so some of these have spent, the first half, just look at the verses. I mean, 1 through, down there through 1 through 11. I mean, and then the second half, not as lengthy, but these are still so much to this. And we see, especially in the New Testament, more of what we see the true intention that God had. So we come to this command in verse 13, do not murder. The idea here is intention, deliberate, malicious. We know that Jesus will expound on this, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. The Hebrew word also has the idea of carelessness or negligence. And so, we, of course, foundation for our laws, so much of this in our society, and we have different, levels of these laws, even, for taking someone's life, and first degree and second degree and manslaughter and, with negligence. And so this has the idea here. The Old Testament does not prohibit capital punishment, war, or what we might consider self-defense. It regulates those. Rest assured, it regulates those. But it does not prohibit those. And so kind of the old, thou shalt not kill is really not the idea as much as the intentional, deliberate, malicious taking of another human life. And so that is the prohibition here. Of course, what's the first recorded murder in Scripture? Yeah, Cain and Abel. And didn't Cain have all of those? Intention, deliberate, malicious. Absolutely. And of course, Jesus is going to expound on that in just a minute with the hatred in our heart, how quickly it spirals, right? It can spiral with people in their life with this. So what's the intention behind the command? What's the intention behind the command? What's God saying here with the deliberate, intentional, malicious taking of life? What's He saying? Well, yeah, don't do it. Yeah, go ahead, Dolores.
We need to love each other.
Okay.
And care about everyone's well-being and hold other people up and not want to harm them.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, Kathy. Finish.
And I think it's a building. I mean, the hate
Mm-hmm.
and the intention has to be there before the threat or the act happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead, Linda.
To me, it also is indicated that's God's decision when they're dead.
Okay. We're going to mention that here in just a second because I have a couple of things that I thought of. The sovereignty of God. We probably don't think about that as much as we should, but whose world is this? Ultimately, who created this earth and the animals and the humans and everything, right? God. Is it ours? No, we're just what? We're stewards of it. And so the sovereignty of God, what right does man have to deliberately, intentionally, maliciously take the life of someone else? What right do we have to do that? We don't. No, it doesn't stop people. Doesn't stop us from justifying it, right? But it is... So what else here, kind of building what Linda was saying, what else think about the intention of what God is saying? Life is precious, right? It comes from God. It's a gift of God. It's to be valued then, right? Something that's precious. What else, Dolores?
Every person is made in the image of God.
Yeah.
And we need to respect that.
Yeah, that's stated clearly in Genesis 1 and 2, that we're made in the image of God. Now, from a practical standpoint, what's God doing with the nation of Israel here? He's building a what? A society, right? How important is this in what's called peace in the camp, right? How important is peace in the camp? Right? Pretty important. And if people are just, taking life, in their own hands, and this is not going to be beneficial to any. So we talked about the sovereignty of God. I mentioned that it's God's. Life is sacred. That's kind of what several of these comments were indicating. Life is sacred. Someone mentioned, Dolores mentioned, made in the image of God. Go ahead.
And also, God tells us in the Bible that vengeance
multiple times. Vengeance is mine, I will repay. Even the statements eye for an eye, which are often quoted and used kind of out of context, Someone punches you, I'll punch them back, kind of an eye for an eye. That's not what that's teaching. That's judicial. It's also judicial limit, right? We don't execute someone, right, who's stolen a car, right? There's judicial limit there. There's restraint. There's punishment has to fit the crime, right? And so it's not personal vengeance that we get to take upon someone. Life is sacred. We see that in the text there. Dolores had again mentioned that. Genesis 1, repeated again in Genesis 2. Cain and Abel there with Genesis 4 and 8. And then when Noah gets off the ark, remember what had filled the earth? Wickedness and violence had filled the earth. Men were shedding what? Innocent other blood. And what's the first thing that when you get off the ark, Genesis 9, 5, and 6? Look what he says there. Let's go ahead and note it here. I had it marked in my Bible. Whoever sheds human blood, by humans shall their blood be shed. Again, this is going to be judicial, okay? This is not, you're wrong, I'm going out to get mine. No, that's not. This is going to be judicial. Genesis is written in the context of the nation of Israel. You understand that, right? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. So it's the law is being established here. They're getting their history. And then what's it say there? For in the image of God has God what? You don't shed blood. Why? Life is sacred. Life is precious. Life comes from God. And we don't have any right to take that. And in a deliberate, malicious, careless, negligent way here. And so there's this respect for life that we're talking about here. Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yes.
Even the most evil, ugly person, God knows them from everything about them, and they can change when they know Jesus.
Sure.
So that's why you don't kill somebody because they're mean or ugly.
Right. Yeah.
God knows.
Yeah. And if God did that to us, all of us, right, at one time, none of us would be here. Absolutely. That's a good point. Absolutely. And so in the New Testament, Jesus focuses not on the act, but the motivation. Not on the outward, the external, but the inward. So let's look what he says. Turn over to Matthew chapter 5. Someone read this. Matthew 5, and let's do 21 and 22. Who's got that for us? Matthew 5, 21 and 22. Who'd like to read? Okay, Roy.
Ye have heard that it was said to those of old, You shall not murder, and whoever murders will be in danger of the judgment. But I say to you that whoever is angry with his brother without a just cause, or without cause, shall be in danger of the judgment. And whoever says to his brother, Rachel should be in danger of the council. But whoever says you fool shall be in danger of hellfire.
Anybody get angry this week? No, nobody. I ain't raising my hand. You're not raising your hand.
I get angry a lot.
Angry a lot? Did you get angry at someone? All right. Here's what's kind of, look what he says here. You've heard it said, now he's talking about the law, Moses, you shall not murder. And notice what he says, whoever murders will be subject to what? Judgment. Now we just said from Genesis that whoever sheds man's blood, his blood himself will be shed. Think about that high judgment. You take someone's life intentionally, deliberately, maliciously, your life can be taken. And Jesus, all right, first, we're going great here, no problem, I guess. But it's when Jesus gets to this, but I tell you. Did you ever notice that in the Sermon on the Mount? Now, Jesus is not contradicting. Jesus is, I don't even like to say that he's adding. He's giving the full intention of what was behind God's command here. And yes, he's expanding it. I tell you, whoever is angry with his brother, now watch this. Watch how it goes from whoever murders, be subject to judgment. Now look how that was the highest denominator under the law. Look how it's going to kind of be flipped in a sense. Whoever is angry with his brother or sister will be what? Subject to judgment. And then he continues. He's digging deep with the heart of the matter, the motivation. And again, I say to anyone, whoever says to his brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to court. And whoever says, you fool, talking about these insults that they would give. Look what he says. Will be in danger of the fire of hell. Do you see how he just... What was the highest common denominator in the Old Testament now's insult, hatred towards your brother. Not just concerned about murdering my brother now, but the hatred which leads to the what? Spiraling to insult, which ultimately can lead to murder. But he says, this is in danger of your soul. And Jesus will do this throughout the Sermon on the Mount. He'll take these laws, the Old Testament, and he'll expound upon them, give the deepest intent that God had. Because, the Jews thought, well, as long as I don't murder somebody, right? I can hate them. I can be filled with hatred in my heart. I can insult them, right? But I didn't commit the what? The act of murder. Whew, I'm good, right? No, Jesus said, under the Old Testament, that was the lowest common denominator. Now the highest common denominator is this. Hatred in your heart, leading to insult to your brother or sister, subject to judgment, even the fire of hell. And so pretty big deal, isn't it, in the New Testament? Continue in the New Testament. What's John say? Turn over to 1 John. Dolores, you had your hand up. Let's read this one. 1 John 3. 1 John 3, 11 through 18. Make sure that's right.
For this is the message which you have heard from the beginning, that we should love one another, not as Cain, who was of the evil one, and slew his brother. And for what reason did he slay him? Because his deeds were evil and his brothers were righteous. Do not marvel, brethren, if the world hates you. We know that we have passed out of death into life because we love the brethren. He who does not love abides in death. Everyone who hates his brother is a murderer, and you know that no murderer has eternal life abiding in him.
Okay, that's good. I thought verse 15 is what I intended for us to stop at, so that's good, Dolores. So John references what? This first what? First murder. Goes back to what? Cain and Abel. And says that, talking about we ought to love our brother. Don't be like Cain, who was evil and murdered his brother. Why did he murder him? He was evil. We're not told a lot about the motivation of what behind what Cain did. Jealousy, maybe, yeah. But we are told what he had in his heart. What? Was evil, was hatred. And that hatred led him to act upon it. And so then he gets down here and says that whoever hates a brother or sister is a murderer. What does Jesus talk about when he talks about the Sermon on the Mount? He gets over there later, and he talks about worship. If you've got something between you and your brother, what's more important, worship or reconciliation in that moment, in that context? Reconciliation. Heard a preacher say years ago, sometimes maybe some folks need to go across the aisle, not down the aisle. Now, nobody goes down the aisle anymore. Our churches, we don't, very few times do we have public responses anymore. And that's okay. I'm not advocating that we need to start having a bunch of people come forward. I'm saying that was something that we saw more often, but maybe instead of coming down the aisle, we need to go across the aisle, because he says in that moment, in that context, reconciliation is more important than worship. Yeah, go ahead, Dolores.
Well, in another place, he says that you can't say that you love God who
Yeah.
you have not seen
Mhm.
if you hate your brother who you do see.
Yeah, yeah. And so this really, Jesus is full of grace and truth, and this is truth. This is hard truth. Now, this does not mean I have to what? Like personally everyone, that I have to agree with everyone, that I can't ever get upset with anyone, my brother, my sister. That's not what that's saying. That's not what that's saying at all. But we're going to talk about here in just a moment adultery. But I'll just say it's what you do with that anger or that disagreement or those feelings. Do you let it fester? Do you let it simmer? You know, that's kind of what Paul would say in Ephesians 4, 26 and 27, when he says, do not be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your wrath, nor give place to the devil. When we don't deal with our emotions, when we don't deal with our anger, we don't deal with our feelings, and those of us who are married, who better to talk to, right, about those things than our spouse? We're going to talk about marriage in just a moment. What did God give us our spouses for? As a what? Helpmate. So that's the first place you should, but a close friend, brother, sister, anybody that we can talk to. Yes, when it's right and appropriate, go talk to the person that's wronged you. That's what the biblical teaching is. But again, this is, we struggle with this, don't we? Struggle mightily with this in relationships with each other. Now, just like adultery here, let me qualify it. He's not saying that all the consequences are the same. Okay, so we're not saying, well, boy, I hated him. I might as well go ahead and kill him because or, well, I thought it in my heart. I've lusted, so I might as well just. No, that's not. The consequences, there are different consequences in the severity of things we do. Obviously, if I murder somebody, the consequences beyond just go to jail and could lose my life in the criminal system. I affect other people. So there are greater consequences. Okay, so we're not just saying that. Being angry with someone is just as But what Jesus is getting to is the heart of the matter. Yeah, Dolores, did you? And then Kathy, did you have a? Okay, Dolores, I'm sorry. Kathy, I'm sorry.
Just what I was going to say is God's wanting us to recognize it starts in the heart before it comes out of the mouth or out of in your actions.
Yeah.
It started someplace else.
Yeah, and so, that's what he's really drilling down at. Because again, it's easy for us to say on the surface, well, I haven't murdered, I haven't committed adultery. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Go ahead, yes. Yeah. Paul talks about that. Get rid of malice and bitterness and all that. People that live in that state are just miserable. They're in a prison, and the worst is when the people that have wronged them aren't giving any thought about what they did. It's been years and years, and they're living their life, but the person was wronged is still carrying it. And again, there's an outlet. We need to be able to deal with it. I'm not saying just brush it under the, but yeah, it's real tough. Back here, Angie.
You just said a little bit ago about how hard it is. It is extremely hard,
Yeah.
I think, as a Christian, and especially like if it's a family member
Oh,
or
yeah.
whatever, and they just keep doing over and over and over. And let's say there's a drug problem or whatever. I mean, you can forgive them, but you just get real tired of
Right.
just
Yeah.
repeating the same behavior.
Yeah. Well, and this isn't, we're not talking about, reconciliation involves two people both wanting to be right. And so if someone is not changing their ways, that don't mean we have to let them in our lives and let them keep hurting us and establishing boundaries and saying, look, you are toxic and you are bad for me and my family's life and we're not going to have you, but I still love you and care about you. But yeah, absolutely, it can be the hardest when it's people like family and close people. It's so, so hard. That's why we got to constantly take it to the Lord, because He knows our heart is heavy on that. Yeah.
That's when we need to pray for them and
Yes.
and pray for our own attitude.
Yeah. Yeah. And ultimately, of course, God can control any and everything. But for us, we can only do what we can do for our heart and so it's very, very hard, as Angie says, when we're dealing with relationships and family and close friends. But nonetheless, Jesus full of grace, but He's full of truth, and that can be hard truth. And so this is hard truth. Any other thoughts there on about murder? Go ahead.
Sometimes you just have to turn those things over.
Yeah.
And let Him handle it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, God is sovereign
Yeah.
and He loves everyone. And we just need to love everyone.
Yeah. And God will bring judgment ultimately to every evil act, and even if in this life it's not accounted for and avenged, so to speak, He will ultimately. Any other thoughts? Yeah, go ahead.
Made me think earlier when someone talked about, how can we kill God's creation or whatever. Made me think of David when he killed the Amalekite to kill Saul. It's like, basically, what gives you the right to kill God's anointed one?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how we are. It's like,
Yeah.
what right do we have to kill God's creation?
Yeah, absolutely. That what right do we have? The sovereign God, and and again, I think this is such a big issue today. Go ahead.
Sometimes, like David with Saul, you have to just remove yourself from the situation.
Oh yeah, yep. That's good. Sometimes you got to just say, look, we can't be together. We can't be in the same room. We can't work together. We just can't do this because of the tension, the problems that we can't resolve. I can only control what I can do, but it takes two to make things right and to reconcile, and absolutely, yeah.
David had such a high respect for God that he refused to murder
Mm-hmm.
God's anointed.
Oh yeah, a couple opportunities there, absolutely. And so as much as it's possible, live at peace with all men. As much as it's possible, live at peace. Not everybody we can live at peace with as far as they don't want it. But on our part, turn that over to the Lord. That's the context of Romans 12. Vengeance is mine, I will repay. Go ahead back here. Yeah.
I guess really what I'm asking is a question. We had the execution this past week in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
So, you don't kill and everything, but yet I can't help but think that Christ he had to condone capital punishment in some level because of the two thieves on the cross. He could have easily removed them from that death.
Yeah, that's why we mentioned that, there's not a out prohibition against capital punishment. Sometimes what's called just war. There's some gray in there, okay? There's some real gray in there. And I got to tell you, there are good people can disagree on these things. And even concerns with capital punishment. Is it fair? Does people have access to good legal representation? And so there's a lot of reasons why someone might be opposed even on other grounds in connection to capital punishment. But yeah, Jesus is not, it's not being prohibited. And Jesus and God certainly and Paul give the state the right to execute those who are wicked and are evildoers. And Jesus and Paul do not stand in the way of that. They seem to say that this is actually a part of God gives government for that reason, to punish the evildoer, including high capital offenses. Yeah, Jeff?
Well, I was just going to read the verse that backs up what you said. Paul says in Romans 13:4, "For the one in authority is God's servant
Right.
for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for rulers do not bear the sword for no reason.
Yeah.
They are God's servants, agents of right, to bring punishment on the wrongdoer." Well, a sword
Yeah.
wouldn't spank them.
Right. That's right. Yep, capital punishment. And God has established government to punish the evildoers, and a part of that would be the highest punishment, capital offense. Again, Paul doesn't have to endorse every aspect of every government or even the Roman government itself. This is not an endorsement of all things government, but God has established government for that purpose and for that order, and therefore they have the right to punish evildoers. And but again, governors or rulers, emperors in the ancient times can certainly be wicked and evil and in their executing of people, and that doesn't mean the Bible justifies all of that, but it does establish that order that God gives. Yeah, Jeff? Poe?
Going back on innocent life, it makes me think of like Herod when he killed the babies.
Right.
And Pharaoh killed the babies. You think about the days world, you think of abortion.
Sure.
Taking that life that's innocent in God's.
Yeah, we throw around innocent, and for those of us who are, older and reach the age of maturity and accountability, none of us are innocent. That doesn't mean we deserve to, be killed maliciously, but you think about the most vulnerable, helpless, innocent would be the child in the womb, and that is certainly, I believe, an act of that, of taking of life. Okay, so don't commit murder, and then we got the two biggies here that we thought we'd go ahead and spend time on. I didn't figure we'd get past these two because they're so fundamental, foundational. Look at the next one here now. Verse 14, do not commit adultery. This will be expounded upon in Leviticus 18, so if you want to read more about the expansion of this sexual sins, Leviticus 18. But adultery here is the illicit sexual relationship involving at least one married person. Okay, so we got that. What's God doing here? What's God teaching in this command? What do you think? Okay, back to the sacredness. We'll come back. I want to come back to that as well. Yeah, back to this idea that it comes from God, sacred. Maggie? Loyalty. Okay. What else?
Well, our example was God's people when they went to other gods.
Yeah, he uses that example that they've committed adultery, spiritually speaking, with other nations and idolatries with God. So, yeah. The whole family's affected. And even beyond the family, the immediate family, the whole community and society. Again, what is Israel? What's God doing with Israel? He's building a what? A nation and a people who do not honor their most sacred, intimate, covenant relationships, which is a what? A man and a what? They don't honor that. What will they honor? Isn't that what, and we're seeing, and with both these commands, what are we seeing in our society? The erosion and the breakdown of what? This basic society relationships with each other, murder and violence and insult. So much of this is spewed on social media, and of course immorality in the home sexually. Yes, I see a couple of hands. I see back here. Go here and then we'll go here. Kathy, go ahead. We'll go over here.
Well, marriage is a contract.
Yeah, that covenant. Yeah.
If you aren't going to keep this contract, what makes anyone think you can keep a contract in your business or in any other area if you can't keep this simple?
And why, if I've broken that one, what would stop me from breaking my covenant with you as a business person or a person in the community? Yeah. So Jeff, that's over here.
Well, I was just thinking, in the corruptness of our country's government, I think it was, 5 or 6 years ago, we had abortion rights were up and homosexuality and all these terrible things. And they caught a senator, I think, in South Carolina that had cheated on his wife. And man, the whole country were
well, and I remember listening to, I believe it was J.C. Watts. Remember J.C. Watts? Of course, good football player. But that's not, we'll go there. But he was on the floor of the House when they did the impeachment hearings on Bill Clinton. And I remember his speech, and he talked about this. And he said, I don't care what your Democrat, Republican, what your political views are. He just said, this stuff is going to impact our young people, our society. And, I remember hearing that thinking, and over these last, immediately how casual was sexual immorality even in the late 90s, right? Well, what's over the last 2-3 years, has it gotten worse and a lot? And there's been studies. And again, I don't care if you are Democrat, Republican, Independent. That's not my point. Whether you voted for Clinton or Bush or whoever you voted for. And all presidents are, none of them are, we know. But I'm saying studies, I don't care. All of them have good, bad, ugly, in between. You can make a case for, I'm just saying, and even studies were shown with polling over the years where young people pointed to that act and said, well, it was no big deal. And it was a joke, right? And again, let's not put this on Bill Clinton. This was a society, that had been going down this path for decades. And I know there's political agendas that get involved with that, and so I'm not justifying any of that from a political standpoint, nor would I do that today. One side comes after the other, but the other side's doing it just as much. That's not my point. I just remember J.C. Watts made that speech, and he said, I'm just thinking about our children, my grandchildren, the society we're living in, that we're starting to, the casualness of this even in this regard. So sacredness, and by the way, what are you hearing today? Marriage is a social construct. You can't believe that if you believe in Scripture. It is not social construct means I get to what? We get to what?
Do we get to design it or adjust it?
Shape it, adjust it, right? But if you believe marriage is sacred, what's that mean? It comes from God, right? It is not a social construct. It is a divine, sacred. What did God, the last thing God created? Let's think about that. Genesis 1, 2, creates the earth, the animals, man. Yeah, he creates Adam and Eve. That's not the last thing he creates. Okay. All right, Ron. Watch it now. Watch it, Ron. All right. We're going to have to call it a draw there, Ron. But what does he establishes? What? Marriage, the home, family. And so the covenant of marriage, let me also give it to you. Let me put it as gentle as I can. This is also being recorded. It's the celebration of intimacy. There is nothing more intimate than the physical act that a man and woman. I know it's more than physical, okay? Oh, I know that. I know emotional, guys. It's more than, okay? It's emotional. There's a lot more. But nothing more intimate than that physical act between a marriage and a man and a woman. And that embodies the sacredness of the covenant. And Paul says in 1 Corinthians 7, the wife's body doesn't belong to her own, but her husband. The husband's body doesn't belong to him. It belongs to his wife. And when we come together, one flesh, that's talking about sexually. A lot of marriages don't say it anymore in the vows, but I always do. Tell them, hey, we're going to, I had one lady one time got upset with me. I didn't know her that well, and it was a situation they wanted to minister, and so I was willing. And she said, after a while, I could tell she didn't want any preaching. And she flat out finally said that. I don't really want much. I don't want anything Bible. I think she said Bible. And I said, lady, I'm a preacher. I'm going to say something about the Bible and your marriage. And one of the vows she didn't like was keeping myself to you, you know it, what? And to you only. We don't say that anymore in the vows. Forsaking all, it's the last one I put when I do the vows, when I arrange the vows. Forsaking all others, keeping myself what? To you and to what? To you only. Of course, our culture says, if I fall out of love, if I, but it's that sacred. I wish we had time to, we ran out of time. Jesus, talks about lust in our heart. Again, he gets to the heart matter, the intention there, drills down to the heart. It's not when the act, adultery, something going on before the physical act, right? It's lust. Someone says, when I pursue something, when I am pursuing it. It's the same word here, incidentally, that Paul will use there in talking about elders. If anyone desires the work of an elder. It's that same word here in Matthew 5. I'm pursuing it. I can't think anything but it, I've seen in churches before, I'm not going to name any churches, whether I've been a part of them or not in congregations, but where you kind of have to talk people in to be elders and deacons. No, I will not have part of that. And we had an issue with that one time where I was at. We're not talking anyone into being an elder or deacon. They have to what? Desire it. And we need to work on creating the desire, not, we need another elder, and he's kind of on the fence. And no, when I pursue it, that's what you want, and that's when lust changes over into something that I'm pursuing and dwelling upon and thinking about and planning. And so I wish we had time, to talk more about these. Let the marriage bed be undefiled. 1 Thessalonians 4, in purity. He talks about how we handle and treat each other as brothers and sisters. And so, anyway, we didn't have time to talk about these, being proactive in marriage. I thought I'd give you some positives. But submission, the unity that we have in our consideration of each other. The fruit of the Spirit, by the way, is not for you. What I mean by that is you don't just produce the fruit of the Spirit. The fruit doesn't just produce the fruit so the tree can just chomp on the fruit and go, boy, look what I did. The fruit is for the benefit of others. And so if we have the fruit of the Spirit, the love between a husband and wife in the Song of Songs is a great book. Someone says, it's a metaphor of Christ and the church. No, it's not. It's about God's husband's love, man's love for his wife. And now we know the greatest image that Paul uses is the church is the bride of Christ. So he will pick up on that. And so I wish we had time there to talk about a couple of those scriptures. Just want to give you some positives to kind of cultivate our marriages. Put up some guardrails. The last one there, Proverbs 5, if I can put it mildly, be content with your spouse. Cultivate that relationship. And so anyway, all right, well, I thought I'd beat on those two. Those are pretty big ones. We'll finish up the 10 Commandments next week, I promise.